If you're thinking about moving from New York to Florida and wondering whether it's going to be a mistake, if that's the case, then this video is for you. There are many aspects when it comes to moving from New York, the New York City area, into here in Florida. And this video, I want to capture all of it. There are some great points. There are some points when I did it, I did not realize, and I want to cover them all. So, did I make a mistake? Let's check out till the end. My name is Ray Fernandez. I'm with Living in Palm Beach, Florida, powered by eXp Realty. Welcome. If this is your first time to our channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button there over in the corner. While you're at it, ring that bell. What that'll do is I'll notify you each time we put out a new video. We put out new videos every single week. So if you're wondering what it's like to eat, sleep, and drink here in Florida, if that's the case, then this channel is for you. 16 years ago, my family and I relocated to this part of the world we call Florida, and we haven't looked back. Today, we truly find honored to help people, perhaps like you, make that exact same decision. We've helped so many people decide whether Florida should be their home, and we absolutely love helping people like that. So if you find yourself in that situation, you're wondering whether Florida should be your home, and you want advice from people who have actually done it, well, there's a few ways to get a hold of our team. Down below is our email address. That's one great way. Also on the screen, you see our phone number. You can either call or text that number. Two of the best ways is in the description and the comments section. There's a link. Click on that link. What that'll do is that'll help set up some time for us to speak, either through a phone call or through a Zoom, whatever way you feel most comfortable. In any case, we have your back when it comes to relocating to here to Florida. We made that move from New York to Florida, and there are lots of things we did not realize that I want to point out to you. But it's also the whole move, the whole relocation has really evolved considerably over the last years. There was COVID in 2020. That changed a lot. We have a lot of people moving here. So there are a few things that you need to know when it comes to cost, when it comes to what to expect, when it comes to homeowners associations, when it comes to moving to Florida. And that's what this video is all about. A couple years back, I made a video on moving from New York to Florida, and I analyzed it from a cost perspective. Back then, we had calculated, and we took an area in New York and an area versus in Florida, a very popular area in Florida, and we calculated that on average, the cost difference is 22%. It was 22% lower cost to live here in Florida versus living in New York. Now, that takes into account all kinds of things. One of the biggest components that takes into account is the cost of housing, because after all, that is one of the largest components when it comes to your budget every single month. So recently, that gap has narrowed considerably. The demand for Florida has increased considerably, especially since 2020, when more and more jobs became remote. Here at Living in Palm Beach, Florida, we speak to people all the time. Probably the number one category of people that we speak to are people who did have remote job, who did have an in-person job and now have gone remote. And if you can live anywhere in the world, you got to figure that Florida is going to be one of the places they consider. Because of all that, the prices of homes have gone up more here in Florida than they have in New York. Now, across the country, home prices have gone up a lot, but no place in the world, no place in the country have they gone up more than here in Florida. Because of all this, today, the gap that was once 22% cost of living, lower here in Florida, is now only 8%. Now, that big component I was referring to, housing is about 19% lower. If you were to buy a home here in Florida versus New York, you will have about a 19% on average cost in terms of your home. Rent is only down 1%. So the rents are almost identical in New York and Florida. What we see, and we see a lot of this here at Living in Palm Beach, Florida, is people are buying, a lot of relocation clients buy new construction homes. So what happens is they buy, it takes about a year, maybe sometimes 15 months for the home to be built. So they have, so in the meantime, they rent while they sell their house in New York. Lots of times that's what they're doing. So it has put an upward pressure and demand when it comes to renting. So thusly, the price to rent a home in Florida is about the same as it is in New York. Now we realize that prices have gone up a lot. And a lot of people say, well, prices have gone up and I don't want to top tick. I don't want to pay the high prices and watch prices go down. People have been saying that for 3 years. So I will say this, is that the risk, the true risk when it comes to housing is to stay in a rental for a long period of time. In fact, I know interest rates have gone up, but interest rates adjust. So if you buy a house today, let's say, and interest rates go lower, you can always refinance. So that's one of the things that people sometimes are afraid of. But yeah, if you want to learn more about what is involved with that, please reach out to our team. We'd love to help. Waiting around for the prices of a home to fall is just not that smart. It's like waiting around for the prices of the cars to go down, or price of bread for that matter. In the long run, home prices will go up. Yes, it might tick down a little bit and then go up, but in the long run, they do tick up. So your real risk is waiting when it comes to buying a home. A lot of people say this because they saw what happened in 2008 when the market really corrected itself significantly. That was the Great Recession. We don't feel that what happened back then is happening now. That was based upon mortgage rates and mortgage fraud and all that kind of stuff. So today's environment is significantly different. So did I make a mistake moving here to Florida? Now that's what this video is about. There's a couple of things you need to know. One of them is, well, we have no state tax here. That's a big benefit. One of the things I thought when I moved down here was that there would be significantly lower, taxes, real estate taxes, and that's truly not the case. While real estate taxes in New York versus Florida, New York is higher. It's not by a lot, and that might surprise you. You can Google anything on real estate taxes and find whatever the heck you want about Florida's real estate taxes. But I'll tell you this, a lot of it's not true. There are some websites that say that the cost of real estate taxes is 1%. That's false. In South Florida, as an example, real estate taxes, the builders will tell you to expect about 2%. That's also slightly wrong. They're being conservative in that regard. It's our experience that you should look at and budget for about 1.6% to about 1.8% when it comes to real estate taxes if you buy a home here in Florida. There's a big benefit when it comes to buying a home in Florida. There's a homestead exemption, which not only lowers your assessed value, that lowers your taxes. That's helpful, but that's not the real benefit. The real benefit is the provision in that homestead exemption, which is called Save Our Homes, and it limits the amount that they're allowed to raise your assessed value. The county that you live in is allowed to raise your assessed value to just 3%. So when home prices rise quite a lot like they've had in recent years, they can only raise you 3%. That's a big benefit. And over the course of years, if you live in Florida a long time, let's say 10 years plus, your cost savings in real estate taxes is enormous. So did I make a mistake moving from New York to Florida? Well, one of the things that's bad about Florida is when it comes to homes, is the insurance situation. The insurance situation is nuts. And I say this from an auto perspective, and I say this from a homeowner's insurance. Let's take the first one, the auto first. First off, it is crazy down here. The driving down here is nuts. You have a lot of people around here who do not. If you see my video, Avoid Florida, that I put out not too long ago, I mentioned it in there. There are a lot of people around here that are transient. The people that move in and out of Florida more than any other state. There are a lot of snowbirds, so people are only here for a short period of time. There are people here that are a little bit older in general that might retire down here. So all that makes the driving a little bit crazy down here. So because of that, the auto insurance is higher. Expect to pay higher auto insurance if you move to Florida. In Florida, homeowners insurance is a big problem. So if you're moving from New York to Florida, you need to budget for a lot more money, a lot. Reach out to our team if you want to learn more about that. A lot more money when it comes to homeowners insurance. Reason being is, number one, the hurricanes, obviously, but the cost of a roof. So a lot of insurance carriers have moved out of the area. So we have less and less carriers to pick from. And part of it is because there's a bunch of, there's fraud going on where people are, and reach out to our team. We'll tell you more about how specifically how it works. But there are some people that are going into and making claims on their roofs when they don't necessarily need them. And they hire attorneys to fight the insurance carriers. And the insurance carriers just say, enough of that. So if you move to Florida, that's a problem because you should expect to pay more in homeowners insurance. Did I make a mistake moving to Florida from New York? Well, here's one issue is jobs. You need a job. Obviously, if you want to move down here, you need to make a living. A lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, are in remote jobs, so that helps. But in terms of corporate jobs, there were not as many. As an example, I worked in banking for several years, decades. I was a Wall Street trader. And back then, when we first moved here, those jobs were pretty non-existent. There weren't as many, certainly not as compared to New York. And that's true about lots of corporate jobs. There just were not many. But more and more corporations are moving down here. So they are starting to catch up. If you look at the city like Miami, it's been, if you look at Brickell, the financial district, it is booming. You look at even now, as we progress from the pandemic, you look all the way north now is in like a city like West Palm Beach. There is a ton of building going on there. And that's primarily because there's a lot of corporations taking advantage of the favorable business environment that we have here in Florida. Is it a mistake to move from New York to Florida? Well, here's an issue that might rub some people the wrong way. There is a big difference in Florida compared to New York when it comes to like what we would call the shutdown. When we had the pandemic come through in 2020, Florida sort of had more lenient rules when it comes to masks and getting around and all that kind of stuff. And it saved quite frankly, it saved a lot of businesses. We have a lot of people that come from New York over the past 3 years that have come down from New York. Here we are in 2023, that have come down from New York, and they're shocked that people don't wear masks. They're shut. That all these businesses are open. Florida is a favorable business environment. There is not the same culture that you have in New York. If that's a problem for you, then you shouldn't move to Florida. Should I move from New York to Florida? So one of the other factors I find that it takes a little bit of while to get used to, especially if you live in the New York City area. Things closed down earlier here. And it's probably not as bad as it once was when there were just retirees, because today there's not just retirees. There are families that are moving down here from up north in New York. But if you lived in New York, we lived in Manhattan 11 years as an example. I can go out at midnight and the place would be booming in Times Square. You don't have that here in Florida. Things do close down a little bit earlier. Most restaurants and so forth, you will find them closing around 9 o'clock. And this place, I wouldn't call it a ghost town, but it is not as vibrant at night when it comes to what you experience in New York and the New York City area. So if you are interested in a vibrant nightlife, you either need to move to like places like Miami or downtown Tampa, or better yet, don't even move to Florida. Did I make a mistake moving from New York to Florida? Well, let me tell you a story that when I moved down here, people were telling me, and I have 3 children, don't move to Florida because the schools are terrible. You can have a huge downgrade in your education. I will say this, from my perspective, especially here in 2023, that's not true. One of the things that we have found, is that the schools are actually very good. They have lots of different schools to choose from. They have charter schools. They have magnet schools. They have more variety to choose from. Trust me. They have private schools, so you can choose to spend a fortune on the kids' education for middle school and high school. I mean, I literally have people here that spend $30,000 to send kids to middle school, and that's fine if you can afford it and that's important to you. That's great. But you don't need to. There are lots of magnet schools that are high regarded. And let's face it, the end result is to get into a good college. We have some of the best universities here. University of Florida is one of the best public universities in the country. You have University of Miami. You have Florida State University. So they have some great colleges here. And there are people from out of state trying to get into these colleges because they are that high regarded. So if people tell you you're going to have a big downgrade when it comes to school, you need to reach out to our team because I personally do not agree with it. I haven't seen it. But, any statistic can tell you a story with however they like. But it is my opinion, it is our opinion, that it is not a factor in terms of taking a downgrade when it comes to education in moving from New York to Florida. Here's an issue that I should have mentioned really right up front. This is one of the big pet peeves of a lot of people when it comes to moving from New York to Florida is homeowners associations. Here in Florida, there are a lot of gated communities. There are a lot of homeowners associations. You do not get that in New York. You don't have that. You don't experience being part of the board. There are some. It's not that there are none in New York, but there are far more here in Florida. Homeowners associations come with a cost, and that's an added cost. A lot of them might charge you like $500 a month. What they do is they do provide services. They do protect you. I will say this. They do protect you from your neighbor across the street is not cutting his lawn for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months. They'll make sure that it complies. If he wants to paint his house polka dot, they won't let him do it. So there are some benefits to it. But on the other hand, we have a lot of people that say, I don't want to be told what to do. I completely get that. If you are not into associations, maybe you should avoid moving to Florida. Last but not least, this is probably one of the biggest factors, but I've saved it for the end because it's so talked about. It's sort of maybe even overspoke about the weather when it comes to moving from New York to Florida. Obviously, it is warmer here in Florida than New York. I will say this. In the summertime, let's say July and August, the temperature, the humidity, the heat, it's the same in New York as in Florida. Trust me. The difference is, and it takes a little while to get used to, is it is humid. It's very humid, but it lasts longer. So that's where if you have a problem with humidity and having a really long summer, which is basically what you experience here in Florida, if that's the case, if you have a problem with that, you should avoid moving to Florida. One of the things I did not realize when we moved here to Florida is that the rainy season. It rains a lot here. In the summertime, it rains pretty much every afternoon. But the benefit of it is that Florida gets a long dry season. So basically from about October to April, maybe May, it doesn't rain practically. So we have one long dry season, one long wet season. But if you have a problem with a lot of afternoon rain and a big bad rainy season in the summertime, then don't move to Florida, and it would be a mistake. Moving from New York to Florida, it's a big adjustment. We did it 16 years ago, and like I say in the intro, we haven't looked back. I say that in all my intros. It really is someplace that's very different than New York, and the only way to really experience it is to just do your homework. That's my advice to you. Do your homework, watch the videos, and more importantly, come down and take a visit. Look at some new construction communities. The biggest component that we find here living in Palm Beach, Florida, of people relocating is to explore new construction. Like literally more than 3/4 of the people who buy down here in Florida explore new construction and usually go in that direction. We are a new home co-broker, so we see a ton of that. But my advice to you guys is come down, check out, look at some of the communities, find out if it's for you. Florida is not for everybody, and it might not be for you, but whether you love Florida or you want to avoid Florida, the only way is to find out and come down for yourself.